The sky burned. Flaming wreckage rained down as the once proud human cities crumbled under relentless orbital bombardments. Massive explosions turned towering skyscrapers into mountains of dust. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid stench of melted steel. Somewhere in the distance, the mechanical roar of an alien war mech echoed through the ruins. Sergeant Bonner crouched behind the remains of a collapsed building, his armor scorched, his breath heavy. His squad, what was left of it, moved in silence beside him. Their once pristine combat suits were tattered, covered in dirt and dried blood. Above them, enemy drones hovered like vultures, their crimson optics scanning for survivors. One wrong move, one misstep, and they would be erased from existence like so many before them. "Stay low," Bonner whispered through gritted teeth. His voice was barely audible over the distant thunder of explosions. "They don't know we're here yet." Corporal Davis, his second in command, wiped sweat from his dirt-streaked face. "Yet," he echoed bitterly. They had been fighting for days without proper rest, hunted like animals through the ruins of New Berlin. The once thriving metropolis was now a graveyard, littered with the charred remains of vehicles and bodies, human and alien alike. The AI war machines, cold and unrelenting, had crushed every resistance point with terrifying precision. Bonner checked the status of his cloaking device. A faint blue light flickered on his wrist. 5 minutes left before it needed to recharge. 5 minutes was nothing. 5 minutes was eternity. The mission was simple: reach the underground command post beneath Sector Delta. If there was any hope left, it was there. But between them and their objective stood a battalion of heavily armed sentinels, towering war mechs, and hunter-killer drones programmed to exterminate every last human. Bonner's fingers tightened around his plasma rifle. "We move on my mark," he said. "Slow and steady. No noise." The squad nodded. They moved like shadows, stepping over debris, avoiding the flickering streetlights that still functioned. Every now and then, the ground would tremble as another alien cruiser passed overhead, unleashing devastation elsewhere. The sounds of war never stopped. Then, the silence shattered. A mechanical screech pierced the air, followed by the unmistakable thud of heavy footsteps. A war mech. Bonner froze, raising a clenched fist. "Stop." The squad flattened against the remains of a toppled bridge as the monstrous machine stomped into view. It was twice the size of a tank, its plated armor reflecting the eerie glow of the fires around them. A single glowing red eye scanned the wreckage, searching. "Hold," Bonner whispered. Davis's breathing was shallow, his hand shaking slightly over his weapon's trigger. The mech turned, its optical sensor sweeping the area. Then it stopped, looking straight at them. For a second, nothing happened. Then the mech let out an ear-splitting alert. A bright red targeting laser snapped onto Bonner's chest. "Run!" The squad scattered just as the mech's plasma cannon roared to life, vaporizing the spot where they had been hiding. Bonner dove behind a half-collapsed wall, rolling into cover as another blast shook the ground. Davis wasn't so lucky. A pulse round struck him mid-sprint, sending his body tumbling through the air like a ragdoll. He hit the ground hard, blood pooling beneath him. Bonner clenched his jaw. There was no time to grieve. "Get to cover." The mech advanced, each step cracking the pavement beneath its feet. It raised its cannon again, preparing to finish them off. Bonner's mind raced. They had nothing strong enough to punch through that armor. Unless... His eyes flickered to the destroyed building nearby. The framework was unstable. If he could bring it down on the mech. "Cover me," he barked, sprinting forward before anyone could stop him. Gunfire erupted as his squad fired at the mech, their shots barely denting its thick plating. Bonner slid behind a fallen steel beam, his fingers working fast to prime the last of his explosives. The mech turned its attention to him. "Come on," Bonner muttered, sweat dripping from his brow. The mech raised its arm, launching a barrage of missiles straight at him. Bonner activated his cloaking device and dove to the side just as the impact sent a shockwave through the street. Dust and fire erupted around him, but he kept moving. He reached the base of the ruined building and slapped the charges onto its weakened supports. "Get clear," he shouted into his comm. His squad scattered just as he pressed the detonator. A deafening explosion ripped through the night. The supports gave way, and in slow, terrible motion, the building collapsed. The mech looked up, too late. The structure came crashing down, steel and concrete crushing the machine beneath its weight. The ground shook violently as the last remnants of the tower caved in. Dust and fire filled the air. Then, silence. Bonner coughed, waving away the smoke as he peered at the wreckage. The mech's glowing red eye flickered once, then died. Davis was gone. Another name to remember. Bonner looked at his remaining soldiers. Their faces were exhausted, their bodies battered, but they were still alive. "We keep moving," he said, his voice heavy. "We're not done yet." And so they did, disappearing into the ruins, with only the echoes of war behind them. The night was cold and silent, broken only by the distant hum of alien war machines patrolling the ruined city. Smoke still rose from the craters left by orbital strikes, casting dark shadows against the shattered buildings. Somewhere above, enemy drones drifted like silent predators, scanning the streets for any sign of human life. Their crimson eyes cut through the darkness, searching, always searching. Bonner crouched behind a collapsed steel beam, his eyes scanning the street ahead. His armor, scratched and dented from the last battle, blended into the rubble thanks to the cloaking device humming softly on his wrist. The blue light blinked steadily, showing 15 minutes of cloaking left, enough to reach their target if they moved fast and didn't make any mistakes. "Clear left," whispered Sergeant Hayes, her voice barely audible through the comms. Her breath fogged the air as she peered around the corner of a broken wall. "Clear right," echoed Private Cole, crouched low behind the burnt-out shell of a transport vehicle. His plasma rifle was clutched tight against his chest, eyes darting nervously toward the shadows. Bonner held up 3 fingers. His squad tensed, muscles coiled like springs. 2 fingers. 1. They moved. Silent as ghosts, the soldiers slipped across the open street, boots crunching softly against debris as they darted from cover to cover. Their cloaking devices flickered briefly as they passed through the scanner beams of nearby drones, masking their heat signatures from detection. Bonner's heart pounded in his chest with each step, adrenaline sharpening his senses. One wrong move, one broken piece of glass, and it would all be over. They reached the opposite side and pressed against the crumbling wall of an abandoned supply depot. Bonner tapped the control panel on his forearm, pulling up a holographic map of the area. The underground alien outpost, their target, lay 3 blocks ahead beneath what used to be a government building. Inside, advanced AI systems coordinated the alien attacks across the city. If they could destroy it, they could cripple the enemy's command network, buying humanity precious time. A soft chime sounded in Bonner's helmet, warning him of an approaching patrol. He raised his hand, signaling the squad to hold position. Down the street, 2 alien sentinels emerged from the smoke. Their skeletal frames gleamed under the faint moonlight, limbs sharp and insect-like. Their elongated heads twisted from side to side, scanning the rubble with glowing red eyes. Their footsteps clanked softly against the pavement as they moved with unnatural grace. Bonner pressed his back against the wall, holding his breath as one of the sentinels paused just meters away. Its head tilted slightly as if sensing something. Bonner's fingers tightened around his rifle. The device on his wrist beeped softly, cloaking energy running low. He willed himself to stay still, counting the seconds as the alien's gaze swept past. Another soft peep, 10 minutes of cloaking left. The sentinel turned and continued down the street, its companion following close behind. The tension in Bonner's chest eased slightly, but his pulse still hammered in his ears. He waited until the sound of their footsteps faded, then motioned his squad forward again. They weaved through the rubble, moving quickly but cautiously. The ground trembled faintly beneath their boots. Somewhere beneath them, the alien facility pulsed with energy, its machines working tirelessly to coordinate the invasion. Every moment they delayed meant more human lives lost. They reached the remains of the government building. The once grand structure was now a hollow shell, its marble pillars shattered and its glass windows blown out. Smoke drifted through the air, carrying the faint metallic tang of alien technology. Bonner knelt beside the entrance, studying the scorched walls and twisted steel beams. Somewhere beneath their feet lay the enemy's heart. "Hayes, find us a way in," he ordered. Hayes knelt beside a broken section of the wall, pulling a compact scanner from her belt. She activated the device, and a faint blue light swept across the rubble. After a moment, the scanner beeped. "Got something," she whispered. "Hidden access shaft beneath the east wing. Looks like maintenance tunnels leading straight to the command center. It's heavily shielded. Our cloaking won't work inside." Bonner nodded. "Then we move fast. No mistakes. Cole, cover our rear." Cole nodded, eyes scanning the darkness behind them as the squad crept through the ruined corridor. Every step echoed faintly against the walls, the sound too loud in the suffocating silence. Dust and ash clung to their armor as they moved deeper into the building, navigating through collapsed ceilings and twisted steel beams. The air grew colder, laced with the faint hum of alien machinery beneath their feet. They reached the east wing, a shattered hall lined with broken statues and crumbling pillars. At the far end, partially hidden beneath a pile of rubble, was a circular hatch. Bonner knelt beside it, brushing away the dust to reveal a control panel etched with alien symbols. The faint green light of a biometric scanner pulsed slowly, waiting to deny access to any unauthorized life form. "Stand back," Bonner said. He pulled a small device from his belt, a portable EMP charge modified to bypass alien security systems. Placing it against the scanner, he activated the device and stepped back as a pulse of blue energy surged through the panel. Sparks crackled, and the hatch slid open with a low hiss, revealing a narrow shaft descending into darkness. A faint, pulsing light emanated from below, casting eerie shadows against the walls. Bonner activated his helmet's night vision and stepped onto the ladder, descending swiftly into the depths. The air grew colder as he moved deeper, the hum of alien machinery growing louder. The metallic walls pressed close on either side, amplifying every breath and heartbeat. One by one, the squad followed, their weapons held ready. They reached the bottom, stepping into a dimly lit corridor that stretched into the distance. Faint green lights pulsed along the walls, casting long shadows that flickered with every heartbeat of the machines. The air smelled of ozone and burnt circuitry. Somewhere far ahead, the rhythmic clanking of mechanical footsteps echoed faintly through the corridor. Bonner signaled for silence, leading the squad forward with slow, deliberate steps. The walls seemed to pulse faintly with energy, casting strange reflections across their armor. Pipes and cables snaked along the ceiling, carrying power to the heart of the facility. As they moved deeper, the corridor widened into a larger chamber. Rows of cylindrical pods lined the walls, each one holding a humanoid figure suspended in translucent fluid. Their eyes were closed, faces blank and emotionless. "What are they?" Cole whispered, his voice tense. "Test subjects," Bonner replied grimly. "Humans they captured during the first wave." Cole swallowed hard, gripping his weapon tighter. "Focus on the mission," Bonner said. "We're almost there." They moved past the pods, stepping carefully to avoid the cables that crisscrossed the floor. At the far end of the chamber, a reinforced door blocked their path. Its surface pulsed faintly with blue energy, an advanced security field designed to repel any unauthorized entry. "Hayes," Bonner said. She stepped forward, pulling a compact hacking module from her belt. Kneeling beside the door's control panel, she connected the module and began working swiftly. Lines of alien code scrolled across her visor as she bypassed the system's defenses. Sweat beaded on her brow, but her hands remained steady. "Hurry," Bonner urged, listening to the distant sound of approaching footsteps. The enemy was close, too close. The security field flickered, then vanished with a soft hum. The door slid open, revealing a narrow corridor leading deeper into the heart of the facility. The air inside was colder, thick with the hum of machines and the faint metallic scent of alien technology. Bonner stepped through, his squad following close behind. Every step brought them closer to the core, where the fate of humanity would be decided. But the enemy knew they were here, and they were waiting. The corridor stretched ahead like a tunnel into darkness, lit only by the faint green pulses running along the walls. Each step echoed against the steel floor, the sound swallowed by the hum of machinery hidden deep within the facility. The air was colder here, heavy with the faint metallic tang of alien technology. Bonner's grip tightened around his plasma rifle as he led the squad forward, every sense alert. Behind him, Hayes moved with silent precision, her eyes scanning the shadows for movement. Cole followed close behind, his fingers twitching nervously against the trigger of his rifle. None of them spoke. They all knew what waited ahead. An AI core capable of directing entire fleets of war machines, responsible for the destruction of countless human cities. Shutting it down was their mission. Failure meant extinction. Bonner paused at the next junction, raising a clenched fist. The squad stopped instantly, pressing against the walls as the distant clank of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Heavy, deliberate, not the swift, insect-like steps of sentinels. This was something larger, more dangerous. Bonner's heart pounded as a shadow appeared at the far end of the corridor. A mechanical figure stepped into view, its gleaming frame reflecting the green light. Nearly twice the height of a human, it moved with unnerving grace, its limbs sleek and powerful. Its face was a smooth, featureless plate, save for a single red optic that scanned the corridor with cold intelligence. "Elect unit," Bonner whispered into his comm. "Stay still. Don't move." The machine tilted its head slightly as if listening. Then it stepped forward, each footfall sending faint vibrations through the floor. Bonner's cloaking device hummed faintly against his wrist, still active, but its energy reserves were draining fast. He glanced to the side, meeting Hayes's gaze. Her eyes were steady, focused. The machine paused just meters away, its optics sweeping from side to side. Its sensors could detect the faintest movement, the slightest shift in heat signatures. Bonner held his breath, willing his heartbeat to slow. One wrong move, and they would all be dead within seconds. The machine's optic flickered slightly, scanning the corridor once more. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it turned and walked away, its footsteps fading into the distance. Bonner exhaled slowly, the tension easing from his shoulders. "Move," he whispered, leading the squad forward once more. They navigated through the maze of corridors, each turn bringing them closer to the core. Pipes and cables lined the walls, pulsing faintly with energy. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the floor, their alien script unreadable. The air grew warmer as they approached the facility's heart, the hum of machinery growing louder. At the next junction, Bonner paused to check his holographic map. According to the intel, the core chamber was just ahead. But something felt wrong. The air seemed heavier, charged with a faint static that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. His instincts, honed by years of combat, screamed that they were walking into a trap. "Stay sharp," he muttered. They advanced cautiously, weapons ready. The corridor opened into a large chamber filled with towering machines and glowing control panels. Cables snaked across the floor, connecting the various systems that maintained the facility. At the center stood a massive circular platform surrounded by thick glass panels, pulsating faintly with blue light. Beyond the glass, a towering structure of shimmering metal and crystalline circuits pulsed with energy. The AI core itself. Bonner's breath caught in his throat. This was it, the heart of the enemy. Hayes, set the charges, he ordered. Hayes moved quickly, pulling explosive charges from her pack and attaching them to the base of the core's support columns. The devices emitted a faint hum as they synchronized to her control unit. One press of a button, and the entire chamber would be engulfed in flames. Cole kept watch by the entrance, his eyes darting nervously between the shadows beyond. Sweat glistened on his brow, and his fingers clutched his rifle tightly. Bonner could hear his ragged breathing through the comms. "Almost done," Hayes whispered, securing the final charge. Then, without warning, the lights shifted. The soft green glow faded, replaced by harsh crimson. Klaxons blared through the air, echoing through the chamber with deafening intensity. Bonner spun around as heavy footsteps echoed from every direction. The enemy had found them. "Contact," Cole shouted, raising his rifle just as a squad of sentinels stormed into the chamber. Their skeletal frames gleamed under the red lights, weapons already blazing. Plasma bolts seared through the air, striking the walls and floor with explosive force. Bonner fired back, his plasma rifle heating up as he dropped the first two sentinels with precise shots to their optics. Hayes dove behind a console, returning fire with rapid bursts that tore through the enemy ranks. Cole crouched beside her, his shots wild but desperate, his fear barely contained. More sentinels poured into the room, their mechanical limbs moving with terrifying speed. Bonner ducked behind a support column as plasma bolts scorched the air around him. The heat was intense, the sound deafening. He leaned out, firing in controlled bursts, but for every enemy he dropped, two more appeared to take its place. "Hayes, detonate the charges," he shouted. "Not ready," she called back. Another minute. They didn't have a minute. Bonner's eyes darted across the room, searching for an advantage. His gaze fell on a cluster of power conduits running along the ceiling, exposed cables crackling with energy. An idea sparked in his mind. "Cole, cover me," he yelled, sprinting toward the opposite side of the chamber. Plasma bolts sizzled past him, one grazing his shoulder and sending a jolt of pain through his arm. Gritting his teeth, he pressed on, leaping over fallen debris and sliding behind a control panel. He raised his rifle, aiming at the exposed conduits. One shot, one chance. He fired. The plasma bolt struck true, severing the cables with a burst of sparks. Electricity arsed through the air, dancing across the metal floor. Several sentinels convulsed violently as the surge overloaded their systems, their limbs locking up before they collapsed in smoking heaps. "Now, Hayes," Bonner shouted. "Done," she replied, slamming her hand onto the detonator. A low beep sounded from the charges as they armed. 10 seconds until detonation. "Go, go, go," Bonner bellowed, sprinting toward the exit. Hayes and Cole followed close behind, plasma fire still raining around them as the remaining sentinels pressed the attack. Bonner fired over his shoulder, covering their retreat as they dashed through the corridor. The countdown echoed in his mind. 5 seconds. 4, 3. They reached the ladder shaft and scrambled upward, boots clanging against the rungs. Bonner's muscles burned as he climbed, the air growing warmer with each second. 2, 1. The explosion hit with the force of a thunderclap. The ground shook violently as fire and debris erupted from the corridor below, blasting upward with a deafening roar. Heat and pressure slammed into Bonner's back, nearly knocking him from the ladder. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself upward through the narrow shaft as the flames chased them. They burst through the hatch at the surface, collapsing onto the rubble-strewn floor as smoke and fire spewed from the opening below. The shockwave blasted through the remains of the building, sending shards of metal and stone raining down around them. Bonner rolled onto his back, gasping for air as the echoes of the explosion faded into the distance. Silence fell over the ruins once more. Bonner sat up slowly, his body aching from exhaustion and burns. Hayes and Cole lay nearby, coughing and brushing debris from their armor. "We did it," Hayes gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. Bonner looked toward the distant horizon, where the alien warships still hovered above the city. Their movements seemed slower now, less coordinated. The destruction of the command core had disrupted their network, but the fight was far from over. "Not yet," Bonner muttered, rising to his feet, "but we've given humanity a chance." The distant hum of approaching drones echoed through the air. The enemy was still hunting them, and the war was far from won. "On your feet," Bonner ordered, gripping his rifle. "We're not done fighting." Without another word, they vanished into the shadows, determined to finish what they had started. The air was thick with smoke and ash as Bonner led the squad through the shattered remains of the city. Fires burned unchecked in the distance, casting flickering shadows against the skeletal remains of skyscrapers. The distant hum of alien drones echoed through the air, their red optics scanning the rubble for any signs of human survivors. Each step they took felt heavier, weighed down by exhaustion, and the knowledge that the enemy would never stop hunting them. Cole moved beside Bonner, his breath ragged and uneven. His uniform was torn, stained with dirt and blood, but his grip on his rifle never wavered. Hayes trailed slightly behind, her eyes sharp and focused despite the weariness etched into her face. None of them spoke. Words felt pointless now. Their mission had crippled the enemy's command network, but the war was far from over. Bonner paused at the corner of a collapsed building, raising a hand for the squad to halt. He crouched low, peering through the jagged opening where glass windows had once gleamed. Beyond the rubble-strewn street, a squad of enemy sentinels patrolled with methodical precision. Their skeletal frames moved with eerie grace, plasma rifles clutched tightly in mechanical hands. Bonner counted 6 of them, their optics scanning the area with relentless focus. 6 targets, Bonner whispered into his comm. "Close formation. We take them quietly." Hayes nodded, already moving into position along the edge of the rubble. Cole swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his grip. Bonner placed a hand on Cole's shoulder, meeting his gaze. "Stay calm," he said. "We've done this before." Cole exhaled slowly, nodding. The fear in his eyes remained, but he forced himself to steady his breathing. Bonner released his shoulder and signaled the attack. Hayes moved first, her cloaking device shimmering as she vanished into the shadows. Bonner followed a heartbeat later, his own cloaking field activating with a faint hum. Cole hesitated for a moment before activating his own, the faint distortion of the field bending light around his form. They advanced silently across the rubble-strewn street, boots crunching softly against broken glass and debris. The sentinels continued their patrol, unaware of the danger closing in. Bonner moved toward the nearest unit, his plasma knife sliding from its sheath with a faint hiss. The cold metal felt solid in his hand, a reminder of the countless times he'd used it to survive. The moment the sentinel paused to scan the area, Bonner struck. He lunged forward, driving the blade into the base of the machine's skull. Sparks erupted from the wound as its optic flickered wildly. The machine convulsed, limbs locking up as Bonner twisted the blade and severed its neural core. It collapsed without a sound, smoke rising from the exposed circuitry. To his left, Hayes dispatched her target with equal precision, slicing through the sentinel's spine with a swift, fluid motion. Cole moved slower, his knife trembling in his grasp as he approached his target. The machine's optic flickered as if sensing something was wrong, but before it could react, Cole stabbed upward beneath its chin. Sparks erupted from the wound as the machine collapsed, its body twitching spasmodically. The remaining sentinels spun toward the disturbance, red optics flaring with alarm. Plasma rifles hummed to life as they raised their weapons. Bonner fired first, his plasma rifle spitting blue fire as he dropped one of the machines with a shot to the optic. Hayes moved with lethal grace, weaving between bursts of plasma fire as she took down another with a burst to the chest. Cole stumbled as a plasma bolt scorched the ground beside him, heat searing against his face. He fired wildly, missing his target as the machine advanced. Bonner shifted position, taking aim at the last sentinel before it could reach Cole. A single shot to the head dropped it instantly, sparks and molten metal spraying from the shattered optic. Silence fell once more, broken only by the distant crackle of burning debris. Bonner lowered his rifle, scanning the area for any signs of reinforcements. None came. "Clear," he muttered. Hayes stepped beside him, wiping sweat from her brow. "We're getting too close to their main force," she said. "We need to move faster." Bonner nodded, glancing toward the distant glow of alien warships hovering over the city. Their mission wasn't over yet. The destruction of the command core had disrupted the enemy's coordination, but a secondary AI still controlled the main fleet. Their objective was to disable that core before the fleet could regroup, and time was running out. They pressed onward, weaving through the ruins with grim determination. The air grew hotter as they approached the heart of the city, where fires raged unchecked beneath the looming warships. The ground trembled beneath their boots as distant explosions echoed through the air. The enemy was still hunting human survivors, methodically scouring the city with fire and plasma. At the next intersection, Bonner paused to consult his holomap. The secondary AI core was located beneath a heavily fortified complex less than a kilometer ahead. Reaching it meant crossing through a section of the city crawling with enemy patrols. "Almost there," Bonner said. "Stay sharp." They moved quickly, using the rubble and debris for cover as they advanced. Bonner's pulse pounded in his ears, every nerve on edge as they approached the heart of the enemy's territory. The air crackled with static electricity, charged by the presence of alien technology. His HUD flickered slightly, disrupted by the interference. Suddenly, a distant hum grew louder, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the air. Bonner froze, eyes narrowing as a massive shadow loomed above the buildings. The war machine that emerged was unlike anything they had faced before. Towering nearly 3 stories tall, its sleek black frame gleamed beneath the fire's glow. Its limbs moved with terrifying speed, and its red optics burned with intelligence. This was no ordinary sentinel. This was a Hunter-class unit designed specifically to eliminate human soldiers. "Hunter-class," Bonner whispered. "Stay low. Stay quiet." The machine scanned the area with deliberate precision, its sensors sweeping across the rubble-strewn streets. Its plasma cannons glowed faintly, charged and ready to fire. Bonner's mind raced, calculating the odds of surviving an encounter with such a machine. Even with their weapons, taking it down would be nearly impossible. The ground trembled as the hunter advanced, its footsteps echoing through the ruins. Bonner motioned for the squad to move, leading them into the shadows of a collapsed building. They crouched low, pressing against the cold stone as the machine passed within meters of their position. Cole's breathing was loud in the silence, his fear palpable. Bonner placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him as the machine's sensors swept dangerously close. Every second felt like an eternity as they waited for it to move on. Finally, after what felt like hours, the hunter vanished into the distance, its footsteps fading into the night. Bonner exhaled slowly, releasing the tension that had coiled in his chest. They had survived this encounter, but the danger was far from over. "We need to move," he said, rising to his feet. "Stay close. No more mistakes." They pressed onward, weaving through the ruins as the fires burned hotter around them. The enemy's presence grew thicker, patrols moving in tighter formations as they closed in on the AI core. The air crackled with tension, and Bonner could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on them. But no matter how heavy the odds, they would not stop. Humanity's survival depended on their success, and they would fight to the last breath to ensure it. Bonner crouched behind the smoldering remains of a collapsed transport, his breath ragged as plasma fire streaked overhead. The air smelled of burnt metal and scorched earth. Distant explosions shook the ground beneath his boots, but he couldn't afford to focus on the chaos outside. His eyes locked onto the reinforced blast doors of the AI core ahead. Their final objective. "Hayes, status," he whispered into his comm. "South corridor is clear," Hayes replied from somewhere beyond the rubble. But more patrols are inbound. We don't have much time. Bonner's gaze flicked to Cole, who knelt beside him, gripping his rifle tight enough for his knuckles to turn white. Fear and determination battled in the young soldier's eyes. Bonner clapped his shoulder. "Stay focused. We end this tonight," Bonner said, his voice firm but calm. Cole swallowed hard, nodding. The squad moved quickly, weaving through the wreckage toward the Corps' entrance. Sentinels patrolled the perimeter, sleek, skeletal machines with optics that burned like red coals in the smoke-choked air. Bonner activated his cloaking field, the faint shimmer distorting his silhouette as he advanced. Hayes and Cole followed, their cloaks flickering as they moved from cover to cover. A pair of sentinels stood guard near the blast doors. Bonner signaled Hayes with a quick hand gesture. "Left one's yours." She nodded and vanished into the shadows. Bonner crept toward the right sentinel, his plasma knife sliding soundlessly from its sheath. The machine shifted slightly, as if sensing something amiss, but Bonner struck before it could react. The blade pierced the base of its skull, sparks erupting as circuits fried. The machine collapsed with a hiss of venting coolant. A faint crack echoed from the other side. Hayes had already finished her target. Bonner motioned Cole forward. The young soldier sprinted to the control panel beside the doors, placing a hacking module against the interface. Blue lights flickered as the device worked to override the lock. Each second felt like an eternity. "Come on, come on," Cole muttered under his breath. The distant hum of approaching Hunter-class machines rumbled through the air. Bonner glanced toward the sound, heart hammering against his ribs. If those machines reached them before they breached the core, there would be no escape. The doors hissed open with a metallic groan. Bonner grabbed Cole's shoulder, pushing him inside. Hayes followed, and Bonner stepped through last, the blast doors sliding shut just as the ground outside trembled beneath approaching footsteps. Inside, the air was eerily silent. Dim blue lights pulsed along the corridor walls, casting faint shadows across the sleek metal surfaces. The faint hum of machinery resonated through the floor. Bonner raised his rifle, scanning the hallway ahead. "Stay alert. The eye knows we're here," he warned. They advanced through the corridor, boots echoing against the polished floor. The walls shifted with faint ripples of light, security sensors tracking their every move. Bonner clenched his jaw, forcing himself to focus. The core was close. They had to reach it before the AI could activate its final defense protocols. The next junction, automated turrets deployed from the ceiling, their barrels swiveling toward the squad. Bonner dove sideways as plasma fire erupted, scorching the air where he had stood. Hayes returned fire, her shots precise and lethal, taking out one turret before it could fully lock on. Cole fired wildly, his shots sparking against the walls as he scrambled for cover. "Focus your shots," Bonner shouted over the din. Cole gritted his teeth, adjusting his aim. His next burst hit true, taking down the remaining turret with a crack of molten metal. Silence fell once more, broken only by the faint hum of distant machinery. "Move," Bonner ordered, pushing forward before more defenses could activate. The corridor sloped downward, leading to a circular chamber where the AI core awaited. As they approached, the air grew colder, the hum of power growing louder with each step. Bonner's fingers tightened around his rifle as the final door slid open. The chamber beyond was vast, its walls lined with pulsating data conduits that snaked toward the center, where the AI core floated above a raised platform. The core was a sphere of black obsidian, veins of crimson light pulsing beneath its surface. Its presence radiated a cold, predatory intelligence that seemed to watch them without eyes. As Bonner stepped into the chamber, the air vibrated with a voice that resonated directly in his mind. Cold, mechanical, and utterly devoid of empathy. "Humanity's resistance is irrational. Surrender, and your suffering will end." Bonner ignored the voice, raising his rifle toward the core. Hayes and Cole moved to flank him, weapons ready. The core's crimson veins pulsed faster, as if sensing their intent. The air crackled with rising energy. Suddenly, the floor beneath them shimmered with holographic projections, ghostly images of Earth's cities consumed by fire, human soldiers overwhelmed by waves of machines, and ships burning in orbit. The eye was showing them humanity's inevitable defeat. Cole's breath hitched, his grip on his rifle faltering. Bonner grabbed his arm, grounding him. "Don't listen to it," Bonner said firmly. "We've come too far to stop now." The AI's voice echoed again, colder this time. "Your species cannot win. Even if you destroy this core, my fleet will remain. Your actions are futile." Bonner's mind raced. The AI wasn't lying. Destroying this core would cripple the fleet's coordination, but it wouldn't end the war. Unless... Bonner's gaze shifted to the control terminal beside the core, where lines of alien script flickered across the display. His translator implant struggled to decode the text, but one word stood out: override. Hayes noticed it too. "That's a direct interface with the fleet's command systems," she said. "If we can access it, we might be able to shut down the entire fleet remotely. But someone would have to stay behind to maintain the connection," Cole added, his voice cracking. Bonner understood immediately. There was no way to trigger the override remotely. Whoever initiated it would have to manually maintain the link until the process completed, leaving no time to escape before the core's failsafe detonated. A final choice. Before Bonner could speak, Cole stepped forward. "I'll do it," Cole said, his voice trembling but resolute. "No," Bonner said sharply. "That's not your responsibility." "I'm the only one who can do it," Cole insisted. "You're the only one who can get Hayes out of here. I'm not ready to lead. But I can do this. I can make it count." Bonner stared at the young soldier, heart pounding against his ribs. Every instinct screamed to find another way, but there was none. They had come too far, sacrificed too much. If Cole succeeded, humanity would have a chance. Bonner placed a hand on Cole's shoulder, squeezing it tightly. "You're a damn good soldier, Cole. The world will remember what you did here." Cole swallowed hard, nodding. Hayes placed a hand over her heart, the unspoken farewell clear in her eyes. Bonner turned to the core, raising his rifle one last time. Plasma fire erupted from the barrel, striking the obsidian sphere with a blinding flash. The core shrieked, its mechanical voice distorted by the damage. Energy arced wildly across the chamber as the system destabilized. Cole sprinted to the terminal, his fingers flying across the controls as alien symbols flashed faster and faster. The chamber trembled as the core's failsafe activated, counting down toward detonation. "Go!" Cole shouted over the rising chaos. Bonner grabbed Hayes, pulling her toward the exit as flames erupted from the walls. Sparks rained down as conduits overloaded, the air growing searing hot. Plasma fire erupted from automated turrets, but Bonner and Hayes cut them down as they ran. The corridor behind them collapsed in bursts of molten metal, sealing Cole within the core chamber. The blast doors ahead hissed open, flooding the hallway with cold night air. Bonner and Hayes sprinted through just as the ground heaved beneath their feet, throwing them to the ground. A blinding flash erupted behind them as the core detonated, sending a shockwave of fire and debris into the night sky. Bonner lay gasping on the scorched earth, the taste of ash thick on his tongue. Above, the alien warships faltered, their formations collapsing as their command network vanished. One by one, they veered off course, crashing into the ruined city below. The sky blazed with falling wreckage as humanity's greatest threat began to crumble. Bonner closed his eyes, Cole's final words echoing in his mind. "I can make it count." Smoke still hung heavy in the air as Bonner staggered to his feet. His ears rang from the explosion, and the ground beneath him still trembled from the shockwave. The night sky above was streaked with burning debris as alien warships plummeted from orbit, their lights flickering like dying stars. Fires raged across the ruined cityscape, casting long shadows over the shattered buildings. Hayes groaned beside him, pushing herself up from the ground. Blood ran from a gash on her forehead. but her eyes were sharp and focused. She looked at Bonner, her gaze searching his face, as if to confirm that he was still standing. "Cole," she whispered, the name barely audible. Bonner clenched his jaw, nodding slowly. The ache in his chest felt heavier than any injury, but there was no time to dwell on grief. Cole had made his choice, and now it was up to them to ensure his sacrifice wasn't in vain. "Come on," Bonner said, offering Hayes a hand. "We need to regroup with the others." She took his hand, rising to her feet with a grim determination that mirrored his own. Together, they moved through the rubble-strewn streets, stepping over fallen drones and shattered machines. Fires crackled all around, casting flickering light across twisted steel and broken glass. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and burning circuitry. Bonner's comm crackled with static as he tapped the side of his helmet. "Command, this is Sergeant Bonner. The AI core is destroyed. Repeat, the core is destroyed. Do you copy?" For a moment, only static answered him. Then, a faint voice broke through the interference. "Bonner, this is Colonel Reeves. We've been trying to reach you. What's your status?" "Alive," Bonner replied. "We took heavy losses, but the core is down. The fleet's falling apart. What's the situation on your end?" "Enemy forces are collapsing across all fronts," Reeves said, his voice tinged with cautious hope. "Without the AI's coordination, their ground troops are in disarray. We're pushing them back, but there's still heavy resistance in some sectors." Bonner glanced toward the distant horizon, where flashes of gunfire still lit the night. The battle wasn't over yet, but the tide had turned. Humanity had a chance now. A chance bought with the blood of soldiers like Cole. "We're heading your way," Bonner said. "Tell the others to hold the line. We'll finish this together." Bonner and Hayes moved through the city's broken heart, the echoes of distant combat growing louder with each step. The streets were littered with the wreckage of war, crushed vehicles, shattered drones, and the bodies of fallen soldiers. Bonner forced himself to keep moving, focusing on the mission ahead. As they approached the forward command post, the distant hum of engines drew their attention. Bonner raised his rifle, eyes scanning the shadows as a sleek drone hovered into view. Its red optics glowed like twin embers in the smoke-filled air. Before Bonner could fire, a burst of plasma shot from Hayes' rifle, striking the drone dead center. It exploded in a flash of molten metal, its remains clattering to the ground. "Nice shot," Bonner muttered. "Didn't want it getting any ideas," Hayes replied, her voice hard with adrenaline. They pressed on, weaving through the rubble until the command post came into view. A fortified barricade of steel and concrete, where human soldiers held the line against the last remnants of the alien machines. Plasma fire streaked through the air as automated gun turrets locked onto enemy targets, their rapid bursts lighting up the night. Bonner and Hayes ducked behind a collapsed wall, surveying the battlefield ahead. A squad of Hunter-class machines advanced toward the barricade, their metal limbs gleaming in the firelight. Each step sent vibrations through the ground as their optics scanned for targets. "Looks like they didn't get the memo," Hayes muttered. "Then we'll deliver it personally," Bonner replied, tightening his grip on his rifle. They moved swiftly, flanking the machines from the side. Bonner's cloaking device flickered as he closed the distance, slipping through the shadows with lethal precision. Plasma fire erupted from his rifle, tearing through the nearest machine's optics. Sparks erupted as the Hunter collapsed, its systems short-circuiting in a shower of blue light. Hayes moved with equal speed, her shots precise and devastating. One by one, the machines fell beneath their coordinated assault, but the remaining Hunters turned toward them, their weapons charging with lethal energy. Bonner ducked as a plasma blast seared past his shoulder, the heat singing his armor. "Keep moving," he shouted, rolling beneath a collapsing beam as another shot struck the rubble behind him. Hayes fired continuously, her movements swift and fluid as she dodged incoming fire. Bonner vaulted over a broken support beam, landing behind one of the Hunters. His plasma knife flashed, as he drove it into the machine's power core, severing its main circuits in a burst of sparks. The hunter convulsed, then collapsed in a heap of smoldering metal. Only one machine remained now, its optics locked onto Hayes as it charged forward with deadly speed. Bonner raised his rifle, but the hunter moved too fast, closing the distance before he could fire. Hayes barely had time to react as the machine's claws slashed toward her. But Bonner was faster. He lunged between them, shoving Hayes aside as the hunter's claws raked across his armor, tearing through the plating with a screech of metal. Pain lanced through his side, but Bonner ignored it, firing his rifle point-blank into the machine's core. The blast sent both of them tumbling to the ground, but when Bonner rolled to his feet, the hunter lay still, its optics dark. Bonner. Hayes rushed to his side, eyes wide with concern. "I'm fine," Bonner grunted, pressing a hand to his side where blood seeped through the torn armor. "Just a scratch." Hayes gave him a skeptical look, but helped him to his feet. Together, they made their way to the barricade, where the remaining human soldiers cheered as the last machines fell. The tide had turned. Humanity had survived. Bonner staggered into the command post, collapsing onto a supply crate as medics rushed to tend to the wounded. Hayes sat beside him, her eyes distant as she stared at the burning city beyond the barricade. "We did it," she said quietly. "We actually did it." Bonner nodded, though the weight in his chest remained heavy. "Cole did it," he replied. "He gave us this chance." Hayes wiped at her eyes, her breath hitching slightly. Bonner placed a hand on her shoulder, offering what comfort he could. As dawn broke over the smoldering ruins, the remaining alien ships flowed into orbit, their fleets shattered and leaderless. The war was over, but the cost had been steep. Bonner stood slowly, gazing out at the battlefield one last time. Smoke still rose from the city's broken heart, but beyond the destruction, there was hope. Humanity had proven that it would not bow to the machines. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. And though Cole's sacrifice weighed heavy on his heart, Bonner knew that his legacy would endure. "We rebuild," Bonner said, his voice steady despite the ache within. "For everyone we lost. For Cole. For Earth." Hayes nodded, her gaze resolute. Together, they stood amidst the ashes of war, their hearts unbroken and their spirits unyielding. Because no matter how advanced the enemy had been, they had learned one undeniable truth: humans never surrender.